Can I say that I officially love the idea of us covering the X-Men? And the reason why, because I have been discovering all these different books I never heard of before. Like, for example, we're going to cover Wolverine Gambit Victims. Now, this storyline was given to us by Jeph Loeb and also Tim Sells, which honestly is a great team right there. We have covered some other stories that they have worked on together, but this one is really cool because in the 90s, Wolverine was really popular, but so was Gambit as well. And so it kind of makes sense to have these two characters come together for a 4-part story arc, but to also introduce a brand new character in the world of Marvel Comics. And honestly, the opening pages of the storyline does an amazing job of just pulling you in. And let me explain, because as we all know, in the far past, when it came to London, they had this well-known killer, better known as Jack the Ripper. Now, that was in the past. He was somebody who killed off a bunch of women and got away with it. But now in the present day, you now have the city of London being very concerned about the idea of somebody trying to be a copycat, because now you have all these different women dying left and right, but unfortunately, there's no clues left behind to figure out who is this brand new killer. But in the opening pages, we're seeing Wolverine, kind of getting the idea that possibly he is the killer. But now we had to switch over to Gambit. Now, around this time in Marvel Comics for Gambit, he was going through a lot, and let me explain. See, for Gambit and the rest of the X-Men, they had believed that the entire universe was going to die, and the reason why, because of Legion. Now, with all that being said, you had Rogue and Gambit kiss. With that kiss, it allowed Rogue to look into his mind, and she saw some dark things in his mind that made her run away. And so for Gambit, he basically misses the woman he loves so much. And so what he has been doing is using the danger room as a way to create these scenarios where he has to be a thief again. But on these scenarios, he would bring Rogue with him. And so it's him trying to use the danger room as a way to spend time with the woman he loves, even though technically she's not even there at all. Now for Gambit, we do see him make his way over to London. Here's the reason why, because one of the last few victims was somebody he knows, Alexandria Davies. Now, we're not really told here how he knows her so well, but we kind of get the idea that it's most likely somebody he possibly loved in the past. Now, on his way over to London, he had the flight basically say like, hey, you can't smoke on the plane. Now, the whole idea of him not being able to smoke is going to be very important for the rest of the storyline. But right now, we're seeing him being really bothered by the idea that he can't smoke, but also wants to know what exactly happened to Alexandria. Once you do have Gambit arrive in London, he breaks into the office that belongs to Inspector Andrews. Now, for Inspector Andrews, he's the guy right now trying to figure out who is the killer, right? And so for Gambit, he does look through all the different files of all the different victims and comes to find out that in all the different victims, they have found bone fragments inside their bodies. Now, for Gambit, he has to leave. And the reason why, because you had the inspector come back to his office. But for Gambit, it's kind of like, wait a second, they found bone fragments inside their bodies. What is really going on here? But after that, you then have Gambit head over to the home of Alexandria's parents. Now, is Gambit informing them like, hey, listen, I'm trying my best to figure out who killed your daughter. But it's also Gambit saying that he used to know their daughter. Now, for her parents, they're kind of like, our daughter never talked about you at all. And so you have Gambit leave. But right after he does leave, you have her parents call up Inspector Andrews, kind of like, hey, listen, somebody stopped by here and he was acting very weird. But it's also Gambit realizing that he has to keep his distance right now from her parents. Now for Gambit, he does go out in the middle of the night to follow this one lady around who might become the next victim for this new killer out there in London. The problem is that it was a setup. You see, for Inspector Andrews, he hated the idea of what Gambit did to him. And so right now, his main goal is to capture Gambit. Now, for Gambit, he realized he was set up, but he has to get the heck out of there. And so once you do have our hero being able to get away, well, he does run into another character. Because while he's trying to get away from the cops, he overhears somebody calling out for help. It is another woman. And we do see that it does seem like she'll become the next victim. And so you do have Gambit go out of his way to protect her and try to fight against a person who's trying to possibly kill her. Except he comes to find out the possible killer is Wolverine. Now, once he does find Wolverine, he realizes that one, Wolverine has blood on his claws and shirt, but also Wolverine cannot explain why in the world currently he's in London. Now, let's not forget, around this time in Marvel Comics, Wolverine was a tad bit more savage. You see, we had learned over in the Wolverine comics that for Logan, when it came to his mutation, he was supposed to slowly turn into a wild animal in the mind. But thanks to adamantium he added onto his bones, it stopped that process. The problem is that thanks to Fatal Attractions, where you had Magneto rip off the adamantium, that process has now begun continuing again. And so it's Gambit kind of wondering possibly the savage side of Wolverine is responsible for the death of all of these women. Now, for our two heroes, they are completely surrounded by the CID, an anti-terrorist group. Now, as we start the second chapter, it's just picking up the last chapter left off at. It's Wolverine and Gambit being completely surrounded by the CID. Now, luckily for our heroes, this car appears. Now, once the car does appear, you have our heroes realize they're being saved by a character known as Martinique, and I really hope I pronounced that name correctly. Now, for Martinique, she says she works for S.H.I.E.L.D. As a matter of fact, Nick Fury had sent her to help our heroes out. And so, for the first few pages of the second chapter, it's really more just our heroes trying their best to get away from the CID, but also the police of London as well, where they barely get away at the very last second. I mean, technically for our heroes, they did drive their vehicle right into the river, but it did allow our heroes as a way to escape from the police, but also the CID as well, because now they're kind of like, okay, their vehicle had just fell into the river. Most likely, those three characters are officially dead. But for Wolverine and Gambit, once they do wake up, they realize they have no idea where they are at the moment. But on top of that, they now have another dead body in front of them, and that would be Martinique. Now, Martinique was just there to help them, but now it looks like she was just killed off by Wolverine. And so for Gambit, he's kind of wondering in the possibility, is Wolverine now a serial killer? Now for Logan, he said, hold up now. Yes, she is dead, but most likely this right here was not done by me at all. And so for our heroes, they got to figure out where they're at. Now, they do walk around the tunnels, kind of in the sewers as well, but they end up in the same exact place they just left moments ago, where the dead body of Martinique was just at. The difference is now the body of Martinique is now gone. You didn't have her reappear right behind Gambit and Wolverine, and it does seem like she's trying her best to shoot them down. Now for Logan, he knows, this girl right here is not even real at all, because you do have Logan just go ahead and cut her up to show us that she is a robot, to kind of show both Wolverine and Gambit that somebody is trying to mess with them. And so we kind of find out for our heroes, they're being watched by the two bad guys of this book. The first being, well, Arcade, and the other one is the brand new character better known as Mastermind. Really, the daughter of the original Mastermind. Now, Mastermind, the original Mastermind, was a classic X-Men villain where he was a telepath, but he would use his powers as a way to create illusions in your minds, to trick your mind in different types of ways. Now, his daughter, as you see right here, the new Mastermind, she's kind of like him, but at a weaker level. And so we see her right now teaming up with Arcade. But as we dive into the third chapter, we're starting off with a flashback, right? And we're picking up with Gambit being this thief. And we see him being able to steal the items and trying to get away. Now, with this flashback, we are beginning to learn how Gambit had met Alexandria. And so we see him right now being stopped by her because she was a beat cop at this point in time. And she got word about him trying to steal from the place. Now, for Gambit, as we all know, he has a way with words to get people kind of on his side so that he's able to get away. And so he does promise her that if she does allow him to get away, then most likely he'll help her go after a bigger target. And so with him kind of flirting and saying that, he was able to get away and have her believe that sooner or later he would actually help her. But this time, you do have Gambit go through with his words, because while you have her just waiting and waiting for him to call, when she does turn her back to talk to, back then, Detective Andrews, you have Gambit stop by and leave a note behind. And with this note is her now being able to go after a bigger target. And that bigger target was Yukio. Now, we have met Yukio in the past many times when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. The whole idea that she's very close to both Wolverine and also Storm. But we had learned a long time ago that there was some kind of connection between her and Gambit. And so it's the book saying like, hey, here is the possible connection between those two characters. It was Gambit who had technically set up Yukio to be captured by the police, but it allowed Alexandria to get that promotion to become a detective. It allowed Andrews to also get that promotion to become an inspector. And so for Gambit, he really did help out a lot here. But it's also him kind of showing us that he had feelings for her. And matter of fact, he was kind of down with the idea of helping her to go after different criminals. But at the same time, as you all know, Gambit, he does have his purpose when it comes to different people in his life. So yes, he may have feelings for her, but also kind of hoping that she would turn the other way when it came to him pulling off different crimes in the area. But as the flashback goes on, we're seeing her body turn into a skeleton, turning into dust, to be reminded that she was one of the victims in this storyline that was possibly killed off by Logan. Now, technically, we already know it wasn't Logan. It was, Arcade and also Mastermind. But for Gambit right now, he doesn't know that. And so it's him saying, you know what? I need to go after Logan for what he did to her. Now we can see here that it is Mastermind and Arcade playing mind games on Gambit, but when it comes to Logan, they have a different game plan in mind for him to kind of mess with his mind, to have Wolverine spend the night with Mariko. As we all know, Mariko was the big time lover for Wolverine. He was going to marry her, but unfortunately, she had died. And so with her death, it had really messed with Logan. And so it's him kind of reliving a moment where he was with her. But for Logan, he realized there's something off right now about this setting. And so he goes outside. And that is when he's confronted by Gambit. Now, both characters right now being played with by the powers of Mastermind, but you do have both characters fighting against one another, where you have Wolverine believe that it is Gambit trying to take Mariko away from him, but it's also Gambit here saying, no, I'm here to get revenge against you for what you did to Alexandria. And so you have the two characters battle against one another, but while they're battling against one another, it does end up with Wolverine stabbing Gambit right in the chest. And so you're kind of wondering like, okay, where could the story possibly lead to now with Gambit being stabbed by Logan? But as we dive into the fourth and final chapter of the storyline, we're now kind of getting into the part where you have Mastermind realize she has been played by Arcade. You see, the only reason why she helped Arcade out because Arcade told her that Wolverine had killed off the woman he loved, better known as Miss Locke. Now, Miss Locke was kind of like his sidekick in the early storylines of Arcade. But the reason why Mastermind is here because he told her, like, yeah, Wolverine killed off Miss Locke. And so for Mastermind, she agreed to help him out because she also hates the X-Men just as much as her father did. But she now kind of realized that possibly she has been played because she looked into his mind. But as we switch over to Wolverine and Gambit, we do learn here that one, Gambit's okay. He's perfectly okay. And the reason why, because for Wolverine, he realized that him and Gambit were being played. And here's the reason why. Because Gambit was smoking in that battle against Logan in Japan. And let's not forget, at the very beginning of this book, when it came to Gambit on his way over to London, he was not allowed to smoke on the plane. But on top of that, for Gambit, he didn't smoke at all in the entire storyline. And so for Logan, he realized, why in the world we both be in Japan and you are smoking when we were just in London? It showed Logan that something was off about the whole situation. And so for him, he was able to bounce back. But now for our heroes, they go ahead and break free from the room that Arcade had trapped them inside of. And after they were able to escape, they're then confronted by androids that were created by Arcade that looked just like Wolverine. So now we kind of get the idea that yes, Wolverine was being framed by Arcade as this supposed killer in London. But in reality, our boy was actually innocent here. So you do have our two heroes begin the process of taking down all these different androids. But once you do have our heroes make it over to Arcade and also Mastermind, we begin to learn what is really happening here in this storyline. Let me explain. You see, when it came to Arcade, he used to play this game, he calls it, with Miss Locke, where it does seem like he would constantly assault her, but he would just stop and not kill her. But apparently the last time he went too far and unfortunately had killed her off. But the problem was he was too afraid to admit what he did was wrong. And so what he did was, hey, you know what? I'll make a new game where I'll create a new Jack the Ripper, but also frame Wolverine. But when you had our other hero here, Gambit, he said, you know what? Things just got a whole lot better and the game got a whole lot bigger. But he lied to Mastermind, telling Mastermind that it was Wolverine who had killed off Miss Locke. But in reality, no, it was him. And so because he tried to play her, you have Mastermind use her abilities to, well, break his mind. Like he's literally is a broken man right now. But of course, you do have our three heroes watch Miss Locke leave. But the book kind of ends on that note where you do have Wolverine and also Gambit being able to hand over Arcade over to Inspector Andrews. But after doing that, they go their separate ways. Now, the last 2 pages of the storyline really shows us what's going on in the mind of Arcade when it comes to him being forced to relive the same scene over and over again in his mind, where he is constantly being confronted by many different versions of Miss Locke. And the book kind of ends on that note right there. And so for me, this was a cool storyline and I kind of like this a lot. But with all that being said, guys, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.